Is it surprising when people aren't supportive in areas that you think that they would be, when they behave in ways that you totally didn't anticipate? I was just answering an email that I had with my rental office, and they had made a website transition from an old site to a new site and having problems with loading their documents for the new lease. And I've now signed this lease 2 times, and today they emailed me with a comment of, make sure to sign this lease again, we just reloaded it, and if you don't, we're going to charge you a fee. And I was like shocked. I mean, I've already signed it twice. The difficulty's been on their end, and they're threatening a fee if it's not signed by a certain time. What this reminds me of is the number of times that we get into relationships, and when things don't go right, we're completely surprised in the direction that it heads, that it blindsides us. Take flying monkeys, for example. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, flying monkeys refers to it comes out of The Wizard of Oz. And in that story, the Wicked Witch sends her monkeys after Dorothy and Dorothy's friends to hurt them, to harm them. So they're agents of the Wicked Witch. Now, what happens in real life around narcissistic abuse, when our relationship begins to break apart, the narcissist is a very charismatic individual. And that's one of the things that attracted to us about this person. Not only that they were smooth and loved Bombas, and we had this incredible experience in the beginning, but they're often magnetic people. They often are very mesmerizing and attractive. People are drawn to them. Maybe they're not always likable. I wouldn't go as far to say they're likable people, but we're drawn to them. And our friends are too. People in our social circles feel the same pull that we felt when we met them. Maybe, again, it's not necessarily romantic, but they have this compelling way of drawing people. And even though they burn relationships, I'm not saying that, like I said, these are not easy people to work with. But what's interesting is that when the relationship breaks up, when we're being discarded or we've decided to walk away, they tend to set up a situation in which they anticipate our reaction, and then when we respond in the way that they've guessed and predicted, then we look crazy. But it's more than that. That's not the only problem that's happening. The other problem is that our friends don't want to deal with difficult people. They want low conflict situations, and as a result of that, they're going to opt in the direction that causes them the least problems. And if that means siding against you because you're a more easygoing person, then that means you're going to be the one who will lose the relationship. And here's the other thing that often happens. They want the narcissist to like them. Because of the charismatic pull that the person has, it isn't unusual for those around them to somehow at an unconscious level, and they're not often aware of this, but they have this unconscious need for this person to approve of them, to like them. So as a result, we end up having people we thought were in our corner that we find out afterwards were not in our corner. And it is so devastating when this happens. But it doesn't just happen here. It happens everywhere. It happens in ordinary life too. It just happens. Our error is that we assume people see the world in the same way that we see the world when people really don't. People have their unique way. They come at it from the way that they grew up in their families. Maybe they grew up in the culture that they grew up in. It might be from their life experiences, but there are whole lots of reasons why people are the way that they are. And we make the assumption the worldview that we have is the worldview that everyone had. Here's how it showed up for me. Even though I grew up in a dangerous home and was surrounded by a lot of toxic people, I still believed, I don't know why, I think it's because they wanted me to believe this, I still believed that people were inherently good and that people were well-meaning. But what I discovered was that, especially in this last relationship, that is not true, not at all. That there are a lot of very toxic people who have pretty dark intentions and motives. So I would love to hear how you're doing today. Thank you, Brittany. Brittany, I have several mods on here, and so thank you so much for joining me on this live today. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I am a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And these days, I primarily do education and content creation, everything related to narcissistic abuse. One of the things I'm so excited that I want to tell you about is that I am right now in the process of testing out my course, but already the early word coming in is that it's great and it looks really good. And I have published a book. I have published a workbook on it, so that can act as a standalone. It's called First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist, but also the course is now available for purchase, as well as a digital workbook. So the workbook and the digital workbook are the same. The difference is the digital workbook is $5 cheaper, and it also is fillable. So if you download the PDF, you're actually able to write in your answers and click on that. There's clickable links inside of it. The course includes videos, the same content that's in the workbook, and lots of examples in it for you. So it's all about breaking the confusion that we have when we first when we're in the relationship and we don't know what's going on and we don't understand what's happening or what we should do or what the next step is. We're feeling frozen. You know, that mental fog that starts to happen. I know for me, it was something that was like plagued me. It was the last thing on my mind at night. I would keep thinking, should I stay? Should I go? Is this a sign he's getting better? Is this a sign that he's not? How will I know one way or the other? I felt utterly frozen and paralyzed. It was horrible. And victims of abuse describe this as the most agonizing symptom of the abuse is the indecisiveness, the mental confusion, the fog, and that it literally, like, our brain's like a computer. It wants a solution, and this inability to create a solution shuts us down. We get locked into the inability to make a decision. So this course and the workbook, so you can get the workbook through Amazon. You can buy the course through the link in my bio. But this is going to help you break that and help you to make some decision. It actually confronts the indecisiveness and helps you to figure out what to do, what directions to go in. So I'm so excited about it. I wish I had it back when I was in that relationship, but it would save me so much pain, so much pain. So that's been launched, called First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist. Again, you can see a link in my bio. It's also now on Amazon. And but today I want to talk about dysfunctional relationships, everything related to narcissistic abuse, related to what's going on in your life. Maybe also has to do with other things that's related to mental health. As I said, I'm a psychologist. I've had 20 years of counseling experience of working with clients. So put your thumbs up in front of your comments. I'm watching both Instagram and TikTok. It's so wonderful seeing both of you guys here today. I really love hanging out with you, but put a thumbs up in front of your comments or questions. That way I know you're talking to me. And then I would be happy to talk about whatever you guys are thinking about. There was a comment that came in on Instagram. Can a narcissist be depressed? Chrissy wants to know. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the funny part about mental health disorders. They're not exclusive. So just because we're struggling with one does not mean that it shuts out other problems. So a narcissist could also be schizophrenic. They could be depressed. They could have an anxiety disorder. They could also have other personality disorders. That's possible too. It's called mixed personality disorders. They could be both narcissistic and obsessive compulsive personality disorders. So narcissism in itself does not shut off all the other. It could be ADHD on top of, or autistic. They're not mutually exclusive. So they absolutely can occur together. Absolutely. The question came in on TikTok about, can I talk about best tips for depression? Yes, I've worked a lot with depression, Brittany. By the way, thank you so much, Brittany, for being a subscriber. So on TikTok as well as on Instagram, you can subscribe. And when a subscriber puts in a comment, which is, it's hard for me to know on Instagram who's a subscriber, but I know who's on TikTok. Your questions come to the top. So you guys get first priority. And I've turned on benefits both on Instagram and TikTok where you guys can privately chat with me. You can send me questions. Your questions are always come first on all of these lives. I go live twice a week. So those are the benefits of subscribing to my platform. So thank you so much, Brittany. I appreciate that. Best tips for depression. So depression, what is depression? Depression is not a feeling. It's a mental state. And it includes a change in appetite. It could be overeating or undereating. Often a change is sleeping. Maybe you're sleeping too much. You're sleeping not enough. It has, you feel low energy, like just a lack of energy. Your motivation's really low. You also, you just really struggle with feeling like you don't know what to do next. I hear it's a very dark place, like literally like the world's turned dark when you're in a depression. So what can you do? Self-care. I know you hear this, guys, a lot. I know that it's the same thing we say everywhere. And it's something, by the way, I'm really working hard on. It's not easy. I'll tell you, good self-care is not easy. But making sure that you're eating well, making sure that you create enough time for sleep, that you're getting enough away time from your devices so that you get space from that, really help. I would highly recommend seeing a therapist as well as seeing a doctor as well. I'm sorry, somebody just messaged me. I'm doing okay, guys. I don't know if there's something going on in my voice. Today I'm in pain. Okay, if you're hearing anything, you're hearing that I'm in pain. So I struggle with chronic pain. And today's one of those days where I just hurt. But I will get through the day. That's the way I always do. So yes, I'm here, and this is one of these days where I'm just shoving through the day. You know how it goes. I have low back pain. I have, anyway. So, but I've been in the pool. I got my workout in. I was sensitive to that. I didn't go and haul weights on my joints. I actually did HIIT training in the pool. So it was good. But it's it's one of those days. But let's back to depression. And exercise, by the way, is really, really helpful with depression. Even when you don't, one of the things, it might be an echo he's referring to. That's interesting. I don't know why it would be an echo. Because there's no sound coming from anywhere other than outdoors in the outdoors. But that's interesting. How's the sound on TikTok, guys? Is the sound okay? I'm going to stop for a moment and just check in with everybody. Yeah, I grew up on a dairy farm. That's where my injuries came from. I was a kid working on a farm, hauling milk and hauling hay, and yeah, it hurt. It hurt. So, all right. So exercise is really helpful. One of the things about depression is that you have to work against the symptoms. The symptoms are going to say, the birds are too loud. That's funny. The symptoms will say, don't get out of bed, or don't go to sleep, or don't bother to eat, or don't stop eating, or whatever. But you have to use your mindset of what you know is really good health, and then work in those directions, despite the fact that it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. I would highly recommend therapy as well as medication. And the reason is because they did some studies looking at what was most effective. They compared therapy alone, medication alone, and a combination of therapy and medication, and found that the fastest, best resulted from both therapy and medication combination. So I highly recommend that you do both. There are different types of depression. There are some depressions that are related to the situation, that you're in a really rough, stressful period that's getting on you and weighing you down. There are people who are just hardwiring is vulnerable depression. That's more of what we call endogenous, something that's kind of innate. That may happen to some people. They tend to have repeating depressions. And sometimes it's due to a combination of reasons. There's a lot of stress going on in your life, but maybe you're also, at the same time, you're kind of prone to it on top of it. So there's not one reason why people struggle with depression. There's multiple reasons. But I hope that helps to give you some insight about that. There was another really interesting question that posed by Daisy. I want to go back to it. Yeah, I forgot to mention my rules. The rules of the room here are we don't talk about politics, religion, and we don't talk about my looks. Yes, I do wear wigs, and I do constantly see me shifting my look, so I know I'm always surprising you. I'm showing up looking somewhat different. Today I'm wearing a long auburn hair. The psychology of ghosting. So Daisy wants to know, can we talk about why people ghost? What's going on in the back end of that? That's really intriguing. I have now launched back into trying to date. I'm taking it really slow. So far, I've just been chatting with a few people, but keeping it low key. And I haven't met anybody, and I'm not pushing anything. So to me, it's sort of like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I do know ghosting's a big problem, and it's become bigger than it used to be. Because I was way back in the dating pool 7 years ago, and ghosting was not very common. But these days, man, people ghost at a drop of a hat. So why do people do it? I can tell you why I do it, and I have done it. I'll admit that I've done it. And I have some guesses about why people are doing it. So I've done it when I don't want to hurt the person's feelings and I don't know how to get out of it in any nicer way. I know that's not cool. It'd be more grown up to say, hey, there's just not a click. I think we best kind of look elsewhere. I think that's, would be a way more mature way. I have not ghosted this time around, and I just got on maybe a week ago. So no ghosting on my part at this point. So that's one reason. I think we just don't know how to say hard things out loud. And so we opt into just not saying anything at all, thinking that's easier. I think sometimes women ghost because the person that we met, we feel is not safe and we don't know what else to do. And we don't want to take them on and deal with all the shit we'll get if we're upfront with this person, because they won't make it easy. There's something about them that's aggressive. So we ghost as a way to get out of the difficulty of that. We just find safety in not ever seeing them again. I think some people ghost because the idea of a relationship is more attractive than having the relationship. They want to feel wanted. They want to feel like someone wants to see them. But when the idea of actually having to work out a relationship and navigate all the ins and outs of that, that's too much, too overwhelming. And so they back off. They like even the idea of meeting up until the idea of the day when they need to meet up. Then they suddenly find that it's too scary, too overwhelming, and they decide they opt out. They opt not to do it. I think there are some people who are game playing. I think there's some who actually like the chase, like to get people on. It's like they're fishing and they want us on the hook. And once they have us in the hook, they think it's funny just to leave us waiting. I've been left waiting at the restaurant a few times. I think there are people who actually just get kicks of that, which is super sick. But I do think there's that group out there that likes to know that likes to do that. So, but I would love to know what you all think. Why do you think, those of you who've been in the dating pool and have ghosted or have experienced being ghosted, what were the reasons that you ghosted someone? I would love to hear that. Or what were the reasons why you think you got ghosted? It is on the rise. That's what I've noticed for sure. It's on the rise. And I'm not for sure why it's on the rise. So here's an interesting question. Make sure you put your thumbs up so that I know that you're talking to me. And I'm going to watch the comments about ghosting while I take this question. This is an interesting thing. So Symbificus, I don't know how to say it. Symbificus wants to know, have we created too many diagnoses? I have a family member who reluctantly goes to the doctor because they believe the doctor is going to find something wrong, like as if there isn't anything wrong and this doctor is going to make it up when they go see the doctor. So they don't go see the doctor because they don't want to be something arbitrarily created. When to me, this is the same mindset. Are we making too many diagnoses? No, we're actually defining different syndromes and symptoms. So let's back way up. Let's use a car, okay? And I'm not up on the current computer technology, but let's go back to the old days when cars were less computerized than they are today. So imagine that you're saying, it's the brake systems that's going out, but it's near the shocks and struts, but we just call the whole thing the undercarriage. We don't bother to separate the shocks and struts from the brakes. Or how about even, I know there's wheel bearings. Maybe it's the wheel bearings go out, but we don't say that. We just say it's the undercarriage. How helpful is that then when you need to solve the problem with the brakes? It doesn't really work, does it? Because if you go and change the wheel bearings and you need to change the brake pads, you didn't fix the problem. You've missed the problem. So people who spend their time researching diagnosis aren't doing this because they get off on lots of diagnoses and finding something wrong with somebody. Why? That's a waste of time. Nobody wants to waste their time that way. It's because we want better treatment protocols so that people can get better. And you can't get better if you don't know what the problem is. And when we glob things on in the same thing and say, oh, they're just difficult to deal with, and we don't know why. Could be they're depressed. Maybe they're scared to be out around people. Maybe they are narcissistic. Maybe, who knows why? There's lots of reasons why they could find, maybe they're autistic. So there's lots of reasons why we might find it hard to be around other people. But by knowing the reason, by saying, oh, it's autism, oh, they're depressed, oh, they're anxious, then we can help solve that issue. But if we just say it's just because they find being around people difficult, we've solved nothing. It'd be like just saying it's a problem with the car's undercarriage. You can't do anything about that. You're going to spend a lot of time wasting pursuing the wrong thing. So that's why I think, no, I think when I hear this is that, to me, this is an irritable question. It's indicating frustration with diagnoses, as if diagnoses is an attack on us. And here's how I feel. This is what I'm a psychologist, and I've been in treatment myself. One of the things that I was required in graduate school was I was required to have 50 hours of clinical therapy before I was allowed to be graduate with my PhD. It would not have passed me if I didn't do 50 hours in 1 year, which means I had 2 weeks off. I had to go every week, and I had 2 weeks off. That's it. So I understand what it's like to be on the other end, on the diagnostic end, and I've also taken the test. So I understand my personality, what's good about it and what's weak about it. All of us have problems. All of us have problems. Not a single one of us gets out of this life without difficulty. Me too. And part of what makes us strong isn't avoiding looking at these issues. It's looking at them, understanding them, and finding ways to work around them. That's what makes us strong people. So that's why I find us our fear of issues, our fear of diagnoses, or even the concern about the talk about narcissism as if we're hurting people who struggle with narcissism. Hey, we all struggle with narcissism. I struggle with narcissism. You struggle with narcissism. We struggle with the people we meet who have narcissistic tendencies. We struggle with our own narcissistic tendencies. We all have narcissistic traits. So it's not like it's an us and them problem. It's really not. We're all in this together. I would just like to see us do this together better. That's my goal. So, yeah, but it's an interesting comment that you made. Yeah, I agree. Chronic low back pain's a problem for a lot of us, isn't it? It really is. So I'm going back. Yeah, disorders are complex. They are complex. There are a lot of them, and it is complex. We're trying to understand them better, what's going on. Oh, Daisy, so sometimes ghosting's for safety reasons. I agree. I think for women, I don't know for men, but I do know that for women it ends up being we end up, we doing it because we want to be safe for. And yeah, I do think that when someone ghosts, it definitely is a red flag. They're not ready. I agree with you. And you're right. I also agree with you, Cinnamon and Cedar, that we need to take it as a indication of this person's not readiness for a relationship, not a statement on our goodness. That is a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of maturity to do that, but it needs to be, we need to see it as not about us, but really rather about them. So I'm reading through the comments. If somebody's mad at school about their school program today, what's going on with that? Something happening with the school? I'm glad somebody else said they've never been ghosted. I'm glad that's never happened. You've never experienced that. So treating ASD. So is ASD, are you talking about, Chris, are you talking about antisocial personality disorder with stimulants, or are you talking about autistic spectrum disorder? Anymore, those acronyms are so close. I don't know which. I don't want to make a mistake and talk about the wrong thing. Low back pain from trauma. That's interesting. I believe it can happen. And this is why I believe that it can happen. So when we're in a traumatic situation, let's talk about chronic traumatic situation. The body moves into a fight or flight state, which is a state of alarm. And in this state, it prepares to deal with the crises. It acts as if you're like a bear is here, and you're being faced with the needing to protect yourself from this dangerous situation. So it moves the body into this preparation for fight or flight. Sorry, my eyes. Just a second. Devin. Sorry about that. I have groceries arriving right now, which, like, really? Right now? We have to do this right now? Anyway, we will make do. Today is one of those days that we will make do. So back to the fight or flight. So the body moves into the fight or flight state, And as a result, there's all these body hormones and chemicals that happen to prepare us for fight or flight. And one of them is cortisol. Cortisol levels in our bodies rise. Well, cortisol also is involved with inflammation. Can help cause Sorry, I'm really struggling with my eye. I don't want to gross you out with my eye fluttering. I wear contacts with glasses, so when I get something in my eye, it just, anyway, causes a problem in my contacts. So the cortisol levels go up, and that's inflammatory, so it causes inflammation around the joints. And of course, the back and all the vertebrae, those are actually joints too. They need to move and flex. So you can have inflammation of that, and it kind of attacks those areas. Wherever you're vulnerable, it attacks. So yeah, I could see how that happens. I know that there's all sorts of inflammatory diseases like arthritis and MS. I mean, it can be inflammatory with our connective tissues, inflammatory with our nervous system, inflammatory around our joint system. All these systems can have problems and cause really long-term issues for a lot of us. So many of us who've been in long-term stressful situations are struggling with some sort of inflammatory disease. It tends to kind of, I don't know if they've done research to look at the correlation between those two, but it can really have a lot of ramifications for us. So yeah, I know it's really hard that many of us are struggling with this. It's not unusual for me when I meet a victim who's been abuse victim of narcissistic abuse for many, many years, for them to tell me that they have something like lupus or arthritis or something. They usually tell me that they're struggling with some kind of inflammatory disease, and I'm really not surprised because of the body's level of exhaustion and the length of time it's been in this cocktail of hormones that we really weren't meant to live in. Not at all. It's very bad for our bodies. Yeah, it's interesting. So Lacey's saying, does our body store trauma? And this is a fascinating question. And I realize I've been saying this author's name wrong. I heard someone else say it, a researcher who probably knows him. It's Bessel van der Kolk, or Kolk, van der Kolk. I've always been saying a clock. It's not clock, it's Kolk. Kolk. Bessel van der Kolk. So forgive me if you hear me say his name wrong, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. That's probably the best book currently out there on trauma, is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I got to hear him speak a few years at Washington, D.C. He talks about the fact that how we encode trauma. This is one of the reasons why it's so important when you hear somebody just like almost vomiting the events, the facts, the play-by-play facts. Yes, it's very painful to hear. It's uncomfortable. I feel here, I'm a psychologist and I've been trained to sit with people. I find it very physically overwhelming to hear somebody just tell all the details of trauma. But what happens is when we've experienced a highly traumatic event, the way we deal with it, let me back up. So it's a flight or fight system gets activated. So imagine that you're facing a bear and your fight or flight system gets activated. You would run away. You would then, once you were out of danger, you would be in the shaky position of like shock. You would be breathing really fast. You would go tell the village, let's imagine that it's like 200 years ago. You would go tell your village what happened, and they would then reassure, check you over, make sure you're fine. And then they would probably urge you to go take a bath or, or feed you a meal or do something that would sort of like calm you down, make you feel reconnected with yourself. And then you would probably, get some rest, but you would be shaky for the rest of the day. But everybody would understand, and they would create this room for you to have this big traumatic experience. Okay, so that's what Emily Nagoski calls completing the stress cycle. That completes the cycle. There was a threat, you got away, and then you processed what happened. You processed the event. So let's now look at it. What happens with an abuse situation when we're in a long-term emotionally abusive relationship? So you're in a stress. You're in this situation which feels very upsetting, very toxic, very threatening to you, and then you're in that a long time. You're trying to find a way to get out, and then you don't find a way to get out. So you stay, and then you begin to try to talk to people about it, but then they don't really understand. Plus, they don't understand why you don't leave. So then you stop talking about people, and then you just hold it. You're holding it all in yourself. Well, you're not completing the cycle. The body hasn't had a chance to dispel it. So, in fact, somebody just said, one thing I do is I mountain bike, and it clears my head and clears my mind. Yes, exactly right. We need to complete the cycle. We're not completing the cycle. And one way that we often try to do it, we try to talk to people, but we often, when we don't talk about it, we're not actually leaving the situation. It's like we're sticking around the bear and we keep talking about why the bear is so threatening. Yes, that's back to the cognitive dissonance. We can't decide, should we stay or leave? We're kind of immobilized by that. But because we can't complete the cycle, it stays stored in our body, and then it becomes toxic. We're not meant to carry that in our bodies, and it makes us sick. So one of the things that we have to think about is, as we leave these relationships, we need to be thinking about how we're going to clear the situation so that we're releasing it from ourselves, not just that we're out, but that we find ways to sort of dispel this connection that we've had. Yeah, Brittany's exactly right. Brittany just said, can we talk about the mind, body, spirit connection? That's exactly it. We need to dispel it at all levels. So how are you dispelling your stress from the chronic trauma? Let's ask that. Brittany, can you pose that on a poll on TikTok right now? I would love to hear, and I would love Instagram if you want to share what you're doing. When you feel this like built upness, what are you doing to sort of take care of yourself, heal, give yourself, what are you doing to dispel it? So one of the things I've been doing is I've been getting at least once a month to twice a month massages. And I don't like spending the money. It's painful, frankly. Massages are awesome. I have found somebody really wonderful. But that helps. I also work out. I find that really helps. If I had a bad day and my head's hurting, I really need to get outside, get in nature. I find that helps tremendously. Yeah, treadmill, Pilates, that really helps. Yoga is a good kind of mind-body connection thing. So we're right now talking about physical things. Those are all really, really great. A bath, I know why should we talk about baths actually help? It's a very, it kind of like releases things through our pores and stuff, and it's calming, and it's warm, so it's soothing to our bodies, eases muscles. That's a really good way. Yep, yoga, dance, meditate. Journaling is another good way. Writing. So writing, actually the physically writing is helpful. It also is art. Have any of you tried to do art therapy? That's another really great thing that you can do. Emily Nagoski talked about organizing a primal scream. I've never done that. I thought that's kind of an interesting idea. Praying is a really good one, or having active singing worship time if you're a spiritual person, or chanting might be a very, very helpful thing. Sleep can, as long as you're careful about it and you're not using it in a distracting thing. So there are some people that use sleep as a way to run away from it. It's not that wouldn't be helpful, but if you're been not doing good care with around the sleep, that certainly would be a good way. I think also socializing with other people. One of the things I found super helpful, and I did this for a year. I did it 3 hours a week. 3 hours a week for a year. I went to a group with other people who were survivors, and we took turns sharing our story and listening to each other and affirming each other. It was sort of a controlled situation in which there was mediation, so that no one kind of dominated the floor or overwhelmed the group or triggered the group. I found that was extremely helpful, was to sit in a group, in a safe group, and had a way to sort of dispel by telling my story. That was very, very healing. So that's another great idea. You guys are full of awesome ideas. I love that. This has really been rich. So how else are you guys doing? I was shocked. TikTok is one of these, and Instagram is too. Both platforms, I swear, are narcissists. I swear. They reward you and then they punish you. And then they reward you and they punish you. As I was approaching 100,000, I crossed over, guys. I'm now 101, almost 102,000. But as I was getting to cross over 100,000, TikTok started punishing me. Like, I'd have 90 plus comments and 2 followers. Seriously, it was like, what? It never works like that. But just this week, I think 3-4 days ago, I had one that's gone to 300,000. It's on dog whistling. So do you know what dog whistling is? You want to talk about it? Because I was shocked the number of people who didn't know what dog whistling was, and also shocked about the opinions around dog whistling. That was very intriguing to me. So, yeah, I thought that was, yeah, it surprised me. No, it has not been posted to Instagram, guys. So you on Instagram haven't seen it. So it'll probably be in a couple more weeks we'll put it up. But I'll be curious to see if Instagram has the same reaction. So what is dog whistling? Coach Abigail Taylor wants to know. So let me talk about dog whistling. Because, by the way, it's something that happens a lot. And there was a really good question that came in on it. Is it always narcissistic abuse, or is it just abusive? It's abusive. Is it narcissistic abuse? Well, could be, but not necessarily. So what is dog whistling? So dog whistling is, you have an issue. Could be with anybody. I used an example of father and son just to get away from romantic couples, because I talk about couples so much, because it doesn't necessarily happen between just couples. It could happen between a teacher and a student. Could happen anywhere. Could happen between friends. Girls, mean girls, do it all the time. So they're masters at dog whistling. So what is it? So you have an issue with a person, and there's an argument, and there's certain words you guys use around this in order to discuss the issue. Like, let's do a mean girl scenario. Let's pretend that one girl's mad that her friend talked to her enemy. The mean girl's mad because her friend talked to the mean girl's enemy. So they have this big argument, and the friend says, I'm not going to limit who I want to talk to. I'm going to talk to who I want. And the mean girl says, then you're not loyal to me. If you really cared about me, you would care about who's my friend and who's not my friend, and you would not talk to anybody who I have issues with. So you're not loyal to me. So the word here is loyal. So another friend comes up that maybe wants to be in this group and wants this mean girl's attention. And this other girl comes up and says, wow, I saw so-and-so, the girl they're having an issue around. And I just turned my head and walked away because I know she's been real cruel to you. And then the mean girl looks to her friend she's arguing with and says, yeah, isn't she so loyal? So it's a code word that's used in another context in public, and it's a reference to an issue that you're having with the person. So they're really dealing with the issue that they have with you, but they're dealing by triangulating this third person and complimenting or criticizing or commenting on the third person using the code word so that you know that they're really talking to you about it. It could even actually be a signal. You didn't have to even use a word. It could be a look or a hand, way of moving your hand. It could be anything so that you know that the person that sees it knows that you're being provocative. You're trying to stir things up. It's a passive aggressive move. And it's a way for the person who's saying it or doing it to express anger and irritation, and to provoke the person who sees it to reacting and looking bad. So if the person who is a friend who is being accused of not being loyal would say something about like, well, you say that to her, but she'd react in some way that would make her look bad. And that's the whole point of it. So that's what's dog whistling. Yeah, I grew up with it a lot. And what's frustrating is when it's happening to you, there's not a whole lot you can say because if you react, you look bad and it's out of context. So you feel paralyzed. Yeah, it's awful. It's a really great way for someone who wants to hurt you to nail you in public and to make you kind of squirm and put you in an uncomfortable spot so that you can't do anything to defend yourself. It really throws you off and puts you into a helpless position, really helpless position. So I'd be curious to know how many of you have experienced it. Now, what defines narcissistic abuse from abusiveness? Because, we throw around narcissistic abuse all the time, but what is that? Well, it actually is a subset. It's a subtype of abuse. So what makes something narcissistically abusive, and it's not that you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you actually probably could be in a relationship with a narcissist who doesn't narcissistically abuse you. I think that's possible. I think that's possible. So what is narcissistic abuse? It has to have four aspects. And this comes out of an article on Psych Central by Dr. Kristen Milston. I think this is awesome. I love how she breaks this down. She says it is a long-term deceptive perception that's been created. So let's be really specific. let's say that we're in a family and the mom really has a need to see like that she is a really wonderful, active, good mom, but she's actually falling apart. She's not doing that well, but she wants everybody to believe she's a great mom. So that would be the false perception. She wouldn't be honest about how she's actually doing. And she actually at home is losing it with the kids and not going well at home. It's pretty nasty at home. But when they're out in public, they all go to put on a good show and it looks like they're doing well. And whatever she does, she characterizes it as in the best interest of the kids or their fault instead of owning that she's actually struggling with an issue. So that's the first, it has to have that, a setup of a false perception or a deception or false reality. Second is it's made to appear that it's done for the goodness of others instead of what it really is. It's actually about the person's not doing well, or they're using the person for supply, or you say I'm doing it for you when really it's being done for selfish or for protective reasons. We're not really talking about, they're not being authentic about what's going on. And I'm not going to remember all of them. So I'm going to need to pull it up because shoot, I can't remember all of it. It's a great definition. It's on Psych Central. Yep. Then it's done in a way that, let me see if I can get it here because I know I'm going to blow it. Oh, here it is. And Dr. Milstead, and if you remember, I interviewed her. She wrote the book, Why Can't I Just Leave? She's really, yeah, okay. So the first is a false reality, which I just discussed. The second is done to where it looks like it's being done for the person's around them's best interest, like it's for your benefit. Let's back to this mom who's not doing well. She'll say that she's losing her temper because she wants to be the best mom she can be for the kids. She won't say that she's not doing well. Then the goal of it is to extract whatever they need from the people for presenting this false reality. So in the case of the mom, it could be that she's saying, she really actually wants everybody to think she's better than she is. She wants the admiration of the other moms in her life, but she also wants her husband's approval, and she also wants the kids to think well of her and not to think it's her problem, but rather for them to own that they're being difficult. And then the fourth thing is they take advantage of everybody thinking they're a good person and empathic and assume that means that she is doing it for those reasons, that she's not actually doing it for wrong reasons. So she presents it in a way that she convinces everybody that she's doing this out of the best interest of the kids and this is what they need. And then it stays hidden for so long that nobody's able, actually this is the fifth thing, that it's hidden for so long no one actually is able to understand that it's abusive or escape it because they can't see it for what it is. That's narcissistic abuse. And if you're interested, this is out of an article on Psych Central, and it's called Defining Narcissistic Abuse, the Case for Deception of Abuse. So yeah, for a lot of us, that's exactly what we experienced. We experienced something in which the person that we were in a relationship with didn't tell us right straight up that they were not who they said they were. That they were looking for something else, that they weren't invested in a long-term relationship with us, but rather as long as we served their needs. Maybe they were hiding a secret life. Maybe they claimed they had a job that they didn't really have, or they claimed to be monogamous and they really weren't. Or I know of some, they've claimed to have an illness. They claim they have cancer or some illness. They claim some false reality, and then they dupe everybody into this in order to get all of the attention and admiration and adoration. And then they end up saying that the way that they behave with this is because they're for our best interest, and then nobody believes that this person's capable of it. It's sad. It's just shocking. I've heard of 2 situations now which somebody pretended to have cancer and got everybody to believe that they had cancer and were dying of cancer, and they had no diagnosis at all. I can't imagine pulling that off. That would be tough, really tough. So here's a question. I just saw dog whistling. 100% of us on TikTok has experienced dog whistling. So here's a question. So how many of you, what was my question going to be? How many of you were duped by something? That your partner said something, told you a story that you thought was true, and you get down the road and you find out that it's not true at all. That's a complete fabrication. How many of you heard something like that? Maybe that they were working in a job that they didn't have. I had a client do it to me. I mean, not only was I in a marriage that did it, yes, I experienced it in a love relationship, but I actually had a client came in and told me that their father, and then the mom said the same thing, told me the father had a job that he didn't have. They exaggerated his position. I was shocked. He worked at the hospital, and they said that he was like a doctor there when he was a tech there. My thought was, wow, that's incredible that this family would be pulling off that the father was somebody that he wasn't, you know? Somebody said that they had a friend that she had intrauterine cancer. Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah, somebody else said that they would be my soulmate if I gave him a relationship. Oh, somebody else said they faked a heart attack. Amazing. It is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Mine actually lost. I think he lost a job and didn't tell me the real reason why. That was one of the lies that I had heard. And the other one was that he was seeing an AA supporter, AA mentor, and he never met up with the person. And those meetings never happened. He probably wasn't even going to AA meetings at all. Probably was doing something else during those times when he said he was doing that. So somebody on Instagram said he told me he was headhunted to work to protect the royal family. Isn't that amazing? I find that shocking. Well, I've got 7 more minutes today. What would you like to talk about in the last 7 minutes? Can someone put a thumbs up on the topic that they would really love to talk about today? Oh, somebody said they lied for 10 years about who their biological parents were. Oh, that's interesting. And then someone else said they lied about signing a document that I needed signed. Oh yeah, they will do. Or somebody said they're going blind when they weren't going blind at all. So how do you help? Here's a question that came in. This is a good question. How do you help? And then 2 questions came in that are interesting. One is, how do you help somebody who's a new victim of abuse? Let me even back it up, because this is a common question that comes in. You see someone marrying somebody that you know is going to be in a narcissistically abusive relationship. You already know that the person they're getting in a relationship with is troubled, and you're very, very concerned, and you know this just spells disaster. What do you do? Well, I can tell you what you can't do. I can't tell you so much what to do, but I can tell you what you can't do. You can't stop it, because they're not going to hear you, and what you're going to risk is they're going to cut you off if you push too hard. You want to find a way to stay in their life so that you have a place to be in that life when they get into trouble and they're ready to see the truth. They're not going to see it in the beginning. I fired 2 therapists who were pushing me too hard. So you need to find a way to express your concern and then be in context with this, or contact, that's the word I'm looking. Be in contact with the person in a way it's non-judgmental, so they feel a permission to be honest with you. But part of the problem is going to be protecting your own boundaries, because they're going to be talking about things that are exhausting and sort of like there's no solution, and they're going to want you to have a solution for them when there isn't one. That's exhausting. So you'll have to have really good boundaries not to take ownership of that as that happens. And then when they get into the position of being ready to get out, for you then to help them make the plan, the safe plan. It is hard work. Honestly, guys, it's hard work. And I know it's not anything any of us want to sign up for. I remember watching someone I love dearly get into a marriage that I knew wasn't going to be good. I just knew it. I knew this was going to be taxing and hard. And I remember years later, they came back to me and said, "You warned me. I didn't know that you meant it was going to be that hard." I knew it was going to be hard, but I needed to be able to be there in a way that they knew they could come to me, so that when they were ready to get help, that I would be one of the people they would think to turn to for help. So that's the challenge, is how to stay on that edge where you're not condoning, you're not approving, but you're also not rejecting, criticizing, and being part of the non-supportive people who are just piling on to this person. So it's a really challenging thing. And at the same time, how not to let yourself get exhausted with hearing the chronic abuse without getting angry about it. Because our natural reaction, one reason why we victim blame is because we get wore out, we get frustrated, we want them to be different. So we just get mad and just tell them to do things that are not possible for them to do. So we need to get into a space where we could say we can protect ourselves. And this is how I do it. This is a little trick they taught us in grad school. It's simple. It's not a big deal, but it does work. Imagine yourself when you're listening to the person that you're in a plexiglass ball, and that whatever they say comes to the edge of the ball and then stays and bounces and stays there. You don't need to let it touch your heart. You don't need to let it in to affect you. You can keep it out here at a distance and stay safe from it. So one way I remind myself is I remind myself this is their life, not my life. They're the ones suffering this. I'm not suffering. I don't need to take on their suffering. I can feel bad. Just because I don't take the suffering on doesn't mean I don't feel bad. I feel bad, but I don't need to take ownership for the decisions they're making. It is their life and they are living it. That helps me keep the separation from them to me so that I'm not overloaded and overwhelmed by what's going on. Great question. Thank you for asking it. And then someone else asked me, so how do you successfully mediate about kids with a narcissistic man? Well, anyone who's toxic and wants to punish you is going to attack you, and they're going to use whatever means they can to hurt you. And if the way to do it around is going to be with your pets, or around custody with the kids, or around money, whatever they think's in the house, whatever they think is important to you, is what they're going to create problems. So to strategically, one thing I would do, if you aren't there yet and you know you're going to be there, act nonchalant about the things that are really important to you. Throw them off. Say what's important to you is something else. Act really invested in something you couldn't really actually give a shit about. Be deceptive like that. I'm sorry, but you have to do that. So throw them off the trail. Use a false scent on something. So that's one way, is don't signal these things are important to you. Now obviously the kids, how can they not know? Or if you have pets that you've loved on and doted on, how can they not know? Those things you can't do that so well with. Anticipate it's going to be war, and anticipate it's going to be rough, and they're not going to play nice. Anticipate that and protect yourself that way. So get everything you can lined up in advance. See an attorney, get a shark in town, find a narcissistic attorney to represent you. I mean, you don't have to like the person for them to be a very effective attorney. And anticipate this is going to be nasty. Another thing you can do is keep a running dialogue, a running comments keep a running mental record. Let me try again. Keep a record of interactions between this person and you and the children, or whatever the issue is. Like let's use the dogs for a second. Let's use something kind of a little different. Write down every time you take the dog to the vet. Write down what kind of medications the dog's on. Write down every time you take the dog for the walk. If you see this person abusing the dog, note that incident. Describe the behavior. Describe the condition of the animal after that incident. Like, he hit the dog, threw it across the room. The dog limped, went to the corner and slept for the next 2 hours and avoided him for the next 3 hours, or her, or whoever it is that you're talking about. Keep a running record of these incidents. Do the same with the children. Names that are called, fights that are happened, what kids are said. But the thing to avoid in this document is do not make any conclusions, or do not use any psychological terms. He behaved like a narcissist. Or don't say that, because they'll say, are you a psychologist? Who are you to diagnose? You're going to end up like hurting your case if you do that. So stay away from buzzwords. Keep it to being observable descriptions. So those are the things that I would do ahead of time. Those are the things that will help you when you get into the situation, so that you can prove that you're fit and that you can prove this person's less fit. Now, bottom line is you're still at the mercy of the court, and I can't predict how they'll see things. So, but these are some steps at least will help maybe sway things in your direction. Hey, this has been really, really wonderful. I appreciate this. I always repost these in their entirety over on YouTube. So this one will go live on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Right now, I'm going to jump over to YouTube and watch Thursdays of last week today, with any of you who are interested in. I chat and hang out with people. I'm not there. You can't see my face. You can see what I was talking about on Thursday, but I am there to chat about whatever you want. And then check out the course, the online course, First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist, and the workbook. It's now available on Amazon. And I'll be back here on Thursday, and super excited to talk to you guys then and hang out with you. Thank you so much for today.